Welcome to History Crossroads, where past meets present, and every story reveals a new path through time.
June 6, 1944, D-Day. Thousands of Allied troops stormed the beaches of Normandy under a relentless barrage of gunfire, determined to reclaim Europe from Nazi control. The world held its breath, watching history unfold. Yet what few realized was that the battle had already been won before the first soldiers set foot on the shore. Not by generals, not by armies, but by a single man, working in the shadows from a modest apartment thousands of miles away. A Spanish double agent had accomplished the unthinkable. He had infiltrated Hitler's trust, fed him an unshakable illusion, and misled the German war machine at its most crucial hour. His name? Juan Pujol García. His codename? Garbo, and he was perhaps the greatest deceiver in history. By the time Allied forces landed on the beaches, Nazi high command was convinced that the real invasion was yet to come. They had held back their most elite divisions, believing Normandy to be nothing more than a diversion. It was all a masterstroke of deception, an elaborate ruse orchestrated by a man with no military background, no formal spy training, only an unrelenting will to change the course of history. This is the story of a man who wove a web of lies so intricate it helped topple the Nazi war machine. A man who manipulated the enemy into trusting him implicitly while secretly working for the British. A man whose unparalleled skill in deception saved thousands of lives and altered the fate of the world. This is the story of Juan Pujol García, the spy who lied to Hitler and won. Juan Pujol García was born in Barcelona, Spain, in 1912, into a world teetering on the edge of chaos. The early 20th century was a time of immense social and political upheaval in Spain, shaping the young Pujol's outlook on life. As he grew up, he watched his country fracture along ideological lines, with deep-seated tensions ultimately erupting into the Spanish Civil War. Unlike many of his peers, Pujol had no strong political affiliations. He neither embraced the rigid authoritarianism of the fascists nor the radicalism of the communists. To him, both extremes posed an existential threat. More than anything, he valued personal freedom, and as war loomed, his singular goal was to survive. But survival in war-torn Spain required more than just luck. It demanded ingenuity, adaptability, and an understanding of human nature that few possessed. Pujol had an uncanny ability to talk his way out of dangerous situations, crafting believable fabrications that others accepted as truth. This talent, though born out of necessity, would one day elevate him to the ranks of history's most successful spies. When the Spanish Civil War erupted in 1936, Pujol found himself in an impossible situation. Neutrality was not an option, and conscription was unavoidable. Drafted into Franco's forces, he had no interest in fighting for a cause he despised. Instead, he relied on his wits. Faking a severe illness, he successfully avoided combat duty and managed to keep himself away from the bloodiest front lines. But his instinct for self-preservation was tested yet again when he found himself conscripted into the Republican Army, the very faction he had once been ordered to fight against. Once more, he turned to deception. Using forged documents and fabricated stories, he managed to slip away undetected, eluding both sides of the conflict. Even before setting foot into the world of espionage, Pujol had already honed the skills that would later define his career: misdirection, strategic thinking, and an unparalleled ability to manipulate reality. Unlike most spies, Pujol had no formal military training, no high-ranking connections, and no experience in intelligence work. By all conventional measures, he was an ordinary man with no qualifications to shape the course of history. Yet he possessed something far more valuable: an exceptional mind capable of crafting and sustaining intricate deceptions. He had an innate ability to analyze situations, fabricate convincing falsehoods, and make even the most implausible stories seem entirely plausible. His talent for storytelling and deception was not just a means of survival. it became his greatest weapon. As World War II raged across Europe, Pujol knew exactly where his loyalties lay. The rise of Nazi Germany and its unchecked aggression repulsed him, and he felt a deep moral obligation to fight against Hitler's regime. But his path to espionage was far from straightforward. He was determined to offer his services to the British, but there was one problem. They didn't want him. To British intelligence, he was a nobody, an untrained civilian with no proven skills, no insider connections, and no official backing. Every attempt he made to contact British intelligence was met with rejection. His appeals were dismissed outright, his enthusiasm ignored. But Pujol was not the type to take no for an answer. If no one would recruit him, then he would forge his own path into the world of espionage. If the world saw him as insignificant, he would rewrite his own story. His mission had evolved no longer just about survival, but about proving that a single man, armed with wit, determination, and an unrivaled gift for deception, could alter the course of history. Juan Pujol García had spent months trying to convince British intelligence to use him as a spy, but every attempt was met with rejection. They saw him as an untrained civilian with no useful connections or proven skills, dismissing him as an amateur, unfit for espionage. Frustrated yet undeterred, he decided that if the British wouldn't take him, he would prove his worth in the most audacious way possible, by becoming a spy on his own terms. But instead of working directly for the Allies, he would first gain the trust of their enemies. Pujol, with no prior connections or references, boldly walked into the Nazi embassy in Madrid, relying purely on confidence and his ability to spin a convincing tale. He declared his desire to spy for Germany, presenting himself as an eager supporter of the Nazi cause. With no actual credentials, no military background, and no intelligence experience, he relied solely on deception. He claimed to be a fervent Nazi sympathizer who despised communism and the Allies. He told them he had access to key military intelligence and connections across Europe that could prove invaluable to the German war effort. The Nazis, desperate for fresh sources of intelligence, took the bait. They recruited him as an agent and tasked him with gathering information from inside Britain. They provided him with money, invisible ink, and radio equipment, everything he needed to deliver top-secret intelligence. What they didn't realize was that Pujol had no actual network, no sources, and no intention of ever helping the Nazi cause. Instead, Pujol created a completely fictitious network of spies from scratch, carefully maintaining communication with the Germans through coded radio transmissions and detailed written reports. By fabricating messages from his imaginary agents and strategically timing his responses, he made his deception all the more convincing. He invented 27 fake agents, each with their own backstories, personalities, and roles. Through carefully crafted reports, he convinced the Germans that his imaginary network was providing high-value intelligence straight from the heart of the British war machine. To make it believable, he mixed verifiable public information with carefully placed inaccuracies, just enough truth to make the lies convincing. At first, the Nazis were skeptical, testing the reliability of his reports and scrutinizing the details. But as his fabricated intelligence continued to align with real-world developments, thanks to his careful integration of public information, they began to trust him fully. Within months, they saw him as a critical asset, believing they had an insider embedded deep within enemy lines. Pujol's fake reports were deemed so valuable that German intelligence paid him large sums of money to continue his work. Without realizing it, they were funding an elaborate ruse that would ultimately undermine their own war efforts. What made Pujol's deception so extraordinary was not just the scale of his lies, but the fact that he kept them consistent. Each of his imaginary agents had a specific role, and their fabricated reports all aligned to create a seemingly coherent picture of wartime intelligence. Even when Nazi officials pressed for details, his responses were so intricate and well thought out that they never suspected they were being played. Pujol had pulled off one of the most daring cons in modern espionage. He had infiltrated the Nazi intelligence system without ever leaving Spanish soil. But his mission was far from over. His ultimate goal was to serve the Allies, and to do that, he needed to prove himself to British intelligence. Now that he had established himself as a trusted Nazi spy, it was time to switch sides for good. However, convincing the British to accept him after posing as a dedicated Nazi informant would prove to be an entirely new challenge, one that required even more cunning and persuasion. Juan Pujol García had successfully deceived the Nazis for over a year, feeding them carefully crafted false intelligence through his fabricated spy network before attempting to gain British trust once more. But his ultimate goal was to work for the Allies, and despite his success in fooling the Germans, the British had repeatedly dismissed him. He knew that gaining their trust would require something extraordinary. Determined to prove his worth, Pujol contacted British intelligence yet again, this time through an intermediary in Portugal. After reviewing his fabricated reports and verifying that the Nazis believed his intelligence, MI6 finally saw his potential. They brought him to London and, after a series of rigorous tests to assess his reliability and skill in deception, officially recruited him as a double agent under the codename Garbo. This name, a nod to the famous actress Greta Garbo, reflected the theatrical brilliance of his deception. Working under British supervision, Pujol refined his elaborate web of lies. He continued to provide intelligence to the Nazis, but now every report was strategically designed to mislead them. His fake network of 27 agents, each with distinct backgrounds and locations, became a critical tool in manipulating German war strategy. To make the deception even more convincing, MI6 ensured that some of his intelligence appeared useful but arrived just late enough to be ineffective. One such instance was when he provided information about an Allied convoy's movements, details that seemed urgent but were deliberately delayed so that by the time the Nazis acted, the convoy had already reached safety. This carefully orchestrated game of misinformation further cemented his credibility with the Germans, who believed they had one of the most valuable spies within enemy lines. Pujol's work as a double agent was not just about feeding the Nazis false information, it was about making them dependent on him. Every message he sent deepened their reliance on his reports. By 1944, the Germans were so convinced of his loyalty that they awarded him the Iron Cross, a rare honor for a non-German. Though occasional inconsistencies in his reports could have raised suspicions, his carefully crafted deceptions and intricate web of fabricated agents reassured the Nazis of his authenticity. Meanwhile, the British honored him with an MBE member of the Order of the British Empire, making him one of the only individuals in history to be decorated by both sides of the war. From his safe house in London, Pujol operated one of the most intricate deception campaigns in military history. Using clandestine radio transmissions and encrypted messages, he maintained contact with both the British and the Germans, carefully balancing their expectations while feeding the Nazis a meticulously curated mix of truths and falsehoods. His ability to manipulate Nazi intelligence not only saved lives, but also paved the way for one of the most crucial moments of the war, the deception surrounding D-Day. Juan Pujol Garcia's greatest triumph as a double agent came in 1944, after nearly 4 years of working undercover, when he played a pivotal role in ensuring the success of the Allied invasion of Normandy. The Germans believed they had a highly valuable informant in Pujol, unaware that he was, in fact, feeding them a carefully orchestrated web of lies. His deception would become one of the most crucial intelligence operations of World War II. In the months leading up to D-Day, Pujol, under the guidance of British intelligence, meticulously crafted a series of false reports that led the Nazis to believe the real invasion would take place at Pas de Calais, not Normandy. His reports were so detailed and convincing that even after the landings had begun in Normandy on June 6, 1944, The German High Command hesitated to move their reinforcements for nearly 7 weeks, convinced that the main attack was still imminent elsewhere. Pujol and his fictitious spy network delivered carefully timed misinformation, sending urgent messages warning of an impending invasion at Pas de Calais. These reports reinforced the Nazi belief that Normandy was nothing more than a diversion. His deception was further supported by Operation Fortitude, a large-scale Allied effort designed to create the illusion of an entire army poised to strike northern France. Inflatable tanks, fake radio transmissions, and fabricated military divisions all contributed to the ruse, perfectly aligning with Pujol's intelligence reports. Nazi high command intercepted this fabricated intelligence, strengthening their resolve to keep their best forces stationed at Calais for an attack that would never come. The Nazis, trusting Pujol implicitly, kept their strongest divisions in Calais, waiting for an assault that never materialized. This hesitation allowed the real Allied forces to establish a foothold in Normandy, securing a decisive victory that would change the course of the war. Pujol's deception was so effective that despite his direct role in misleading the Nazis and ensuring Hitler's defeat, the Germans awarded him the Iron Cross for his service to the Reich. Astonishingly, they never suspected his true allegiance, continuing to rely on his intelligence even as the war neared its end. Meanwhile, the British recognized his extraordinary contributions by awarding him an MBE, Member of the Order of the British Empire, making him one of the few individuals in history to be honored by both sides of a conflict. Juan Pujol García had not fired a single bullet, yet through deception, strategic manipulation, and an unmatched ability to exploit enemy intelligence systems, he had altered the trajectory of history. His efforts did not just secure the success of D-Day, but also significantly weakened the German war effort, allowing the Allies to advance deeper into Europe and hasten the collapse of the Third Reich. His legacy remains one of the most extraordinary examples of how intelligence and deception can shape the course of global events. With World War II over and his work as a double agent complete, Juan Pujol García faced an uncertain future. He had played a pivotal role in one of the most significant intelligence deceptions in history. Yet, his name was unknown to the public, and his life as a spy had left him vulnerable to potential retaliation. The war may have ended, but for Pujol, the danger had not. Fearing retribution from surviving Nazi operatives who might eventually uncover his betrayal, Pujol took drastic measures. In 1949, he staged his own death, carefully planting false reports that he had succumbed to malaria in Angola. For decades, the world, including British intelligence, believed he had died, disappearing without a trace. In reality, Pujol relocated to Venezuela, where he built a new life in complete anonymity. Unlike many spies who capitalized on their wartime exploits, he sought no recognition, preferring to remain in the shadows. He worked quietly, raising a family and leaving his past behind, as if his years of deception had never happened. For decades, his name was little more than a footnote in intelligence archives, his legacy buried beneath the classified operations of war. But in the 1980s, a British historian researching wartime espionage uncovered inconsistencies in reports of Pujol's death. Intrigued, he launched an investigation that led to an astonishing discovery. Juan Pujol García was alive. In 1984, after nearly 4 decades of living in obscurity, Pujol emerged from the shadows. A British historian, Nigel West, had been investigating wartime intelligence records when he noticed inconsistencies in reports of Pujol's death. His research led him to Venezuela, where he tracked down the elusive former spy and confirmed that he was still alive. Pujol was invited to Britain, where he received an official reception at MWire-5 headquarters and met with intelligence officers who had long studied his work. His contributions were further acknowledged at a special ceremony marking the 40th anniversary of D-Day, where veterans and military officials honored his crucial role in the war effort. He also reunited with some of the British operatives who had guided his deception campaign, finally receiving the recognition he had never sought but deeply deserved. Despite his newfound recognition, Pujol remained humble. When asked why he risked his life in the dangerous world of espionage, he gave a simple but profound answer: to stop the war. Juan Pujol García passed away in 1988, not as a famous war hero, but as a man who had shaped history from the shadows. His legacy has since been immortalized in books, documentaries, and intelligence studies, with historians and military strategists continuing to analyze his extraordinary deception. His work remains one of the most remarkable examples of how intelligence and deception can alter the course of history. Today, his story stands as a testament to the power of courage, cunning, and an unwavering commitment to defeating tyranny. Juan Pujol García may have lived in the shadows, but his impact on history will never be forgotten. Could one ordinary man with no formal spy training truly alter the course of history and deceive an entire war machine? Or was Juan Pujol García simply a master of luck and timing? His deception misled Hitler, diverted Nazi forces away from Normandy on D-Day, saved thousands of lives, and shaped the outcome of World War II. But was he the ultimate spy, or just the right man in the right place at the right time? You decide. If you enjoyed this episode of History Crossroads, be sure to follow and subscribe for more thrilling tales of spies, deception, and the hidden forces that shaped history. Your support means the world to us. Leave a review and let us know what you think. Don't forget to visit our YouTube channel and follow us on social media for exclusive behind-the-scenes content, bonus material, and in-depth discussions on history's greatest untold stories. Until next time, keep questioning history, stay curious, and never stop uncovering the hidden stories that shaped our world.